So I'm going to kick off really. I just want to just refresh on the sort of common best practice, and I'm going to call this back a step. We've got so much great technology and so many solutions we're going to talk about this week, as Alex just outlined in the introduction there. But we've got to remember the basics, and I think it's sometimes easy for people to almost forget some of these. And this underpins everything we do. As simple or complex as your infrastructure and your needs are, this just still underpins everything. And the threats that we're seeing coming out and emerging still, a lot of the time, call back to these common basics still. And I'm going to talk some more about a couple more of the sort of common threat areas that we're seeing in a moment. But again, a lot of the exploits that are happening begin with the basics. So I've unashamedly keep on banging these drums, because if you can get this right, it's a great platform, and you can go on from there and then expand your posture and implement other solutions. So we start off with user identity every day of the week, and I'm going to talk a little later about what some of the what Microsoft and the National Cybersecurity Centre is talking about and doing in that area. But absolutely, getting our user identities secured and managed. It's so common that this is still an area where there isn't appropriate security around your identities. The organizations aren't managing identity properly and in a unified manner. The next big one are updates and our patch management. We keep hearing of exploits that have exploited vulnerabilities, unpatched servers, unpatched laptops, and so on. And there's a reason these patches are released by Microsoft and all vendors. It's because there's been a gap identified and they're helping you seal it up. Conversely, the problem, of course, is as soon as Microsoft release an update, they tell you what it fixes, which is brilliant news. But of course, it tells those threat actors, where the vulnerability is if they didn't know already. So they now know there's a patch released to fix this vulnerability. They will write code that targets that. So anyone who hasn't applied that patch is vulnerable for that new code, and that's common behavior. So again, keeping on top of that. Yes, do patches break things occasionally? Yeah, absolutely. We've all been there, I'm sure. But it's better that you have a situation where you've got a system you've got to restore, and perhaps you've got a broken patch, a broken system as a result of a patch. Better that than a compromise of your network and threat actors in ransomware. We've all heard the horror stories in the press. Of course, with proper change management, we can help mitigate that risk of that break as well. So again, lots of things to think about. It's not just get the patches out there, it's how do we manage that process in a timely manner, but an effective manner. And then on, we're looking at, of course, of all of our configuration controls, and there's some great tools. And again, as you heard in the introduction there from Alex, we're covering a lot this week about all the different tools available, both in the Microsoft 365 stack, for the modern workplace, and the various areas of Azure as well. There's so many tools available to us to help secure. And again, if we're not taking advantage of basically what is available to us, Microsoft actually put a lot into the subscriptions. And it's quite common that, and particularly with things like Microsoft 365, people have a lot available to them. They're just not using it. So lots there. There's the things we're covering this week that you can really help build in. So again, having that control, because if you're not managing your devices, your infrastructure, then if someone can exploit your network and gain access or to your cloud environment or to a device, if there's nothing managing that device or minimal controls, of course, that can be taken over. And if they compromise user identity, elevated privileges, and you've got nothing controlling any of that, of course, it starts opening up the floodgates. User awareness. You may well have heard a lot about this over the last few years. It's something that's come to the fore an awful lot more, and this is staff training user awareness. Absolutely critical. But what we've got to do is very much empower our users and be supportive. I've heard a lot of sort of training vendors saying, using phrases like "your users are your biggest weakness," and phrases like that. Very much a blame culture against your users. And let's put it into our users. They're busy doing a day job. These threats, these fake emails and things like that are getting more and more complex. They're a lot better now. They're harder to spot. And yes, the security controls, if we've done them right, can help filter a lot of that out, but it's never necessarily going to capture everything. That there could still be that one that gets through. So user awareness is absolutely key. But what we should do is thorough training, talk to our users about the sort of common things to spot, but also empower them. So look, we want you to report. If you think you click that link, tell us, because at least then we can do something about it. But if they think they're going to get in trouble for it, what's going to happen? They'll keep quiet. Hope no one notices. That's human nature. So let's be supportive of our users. Let's train them. Let's talk about this, get the conversation out there, and absolutely empower them into feeling that they've got a safe environment to actually talk about this, report any incidents, and because at the end of the day, everyone's be better off for it. So this is all talking about our management so far and how we're controlling and managing environments and being aware. And on from that, of course, it's our ongoing monitoring. Great. We've got a load of controls in. We're managing our identity. We are managing our devices a lot better. How do we keep on top of that? How do we make sure we're keeping up to date? All of that. So absolutely, we need those controls in place. And again, when we talk about things like Sentinel later in the week, that's a really great tool for helping us with some of that. There's many other dashboards and tools available across the different product sets as well. And then finally, I'm just going to say, as a general kind of wraparound, is really just always be questioning. Don't assume because, for example, you put MFA in that your user identities are safe, for example. Much better, without a doubt. But yeah, don't necessarily assume that's it. We're done. We can forget about this for another year. No. Always question: have we done everything we can? Is it meeting the current risks that we will face? And yeah, just be always suspicious. Suspect what's going on, and say if anything, err on the side of caution. We obviously help various. We get called in. We help various businesses if they've got potential problems, and again, we'll err on that side of caution. We'll put full risk assessments in. We'll assume that if there's a suspected breach, that it has gone through until we can prove otherwise, because that way, then in your response, you're actually going to cover all eventualities, or you try to cover all eventualities. If you just assume that we don't think someone got in, there was a link clicked, we don't think anything happened, it's probably all right. Probably what's happened is the opposite, that someone has now gained access. If you assume that from, for example, a link being clicked, someone probably got access on the back of that to some degree, and you respond in that way, then you're going to cover it. You're covering all eventualities. So definitely have that sort of that questioning kind of mentality in the back of your head as you go along. And that kind of supports everything we're doing on an ongoing basis. So already a lot to think about there, but that's kind of where we see a lot of these sort of, say, the common basics. And you'll hear a lot about this from people like the National Cybersecurity Centre, from Microsoft, from the Information Commissioner's Office. They all kind of keep coming back to a lot of this, although the next step on may be more involved, more complex, a much more better articulated attack. A lot of it comes back to this every day of the week.